Da-na-na-na-na. I woke up this morning. Ba-ma-ma-ma-ma. All my Gmail was gone. Ba-ma-ma-ma-ma. I called my friend's father, Carl. Ba-ma-ma-ma-ma. He said, get Patrick and Dwayne on. Ba-ma-ma-ma-ma. It's pretty much what happened.
A true story. True story.
I don't know if it'll top the charts.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Carl. How are you doing?
Good. Dwayne.
I am fantastic. How are you?
Awesome.
You're soon
Good.
to be buried in snow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Very soon.
Snowmageddon is coming.
Snowmageddon.
The reason I sang that little blues song in the beginning is because this actually happened. A friend of my daughter's sent me a message a little while ago and said, "Oh my God, all my Gmail is gone." And the first thought I had was, "Oh, geez, the Russians are at it again." Not today, Russia. Not today.
That is such a great YouTube.
But yeah, we're helping her work through it.
I think she's made progress. I think we did it. She's certainly in a better place than she was security-wise before we started talking.
Anyway, it's a scary prospect. I mean, you just mention to anybody, hey, what would you do if you woke up one morning and all your Gmail and everything on Drive was just vanished? And people just will freak out. Like, oh my God, everything I own is on Google Drive or whatever. Could, Dropbox, insert here. But, when you rely on these cloud services and you put everything that you own up there so that you don't have to keep them on hard drives or whatever, it's pretty scary.
You can only be betrayed by those things that you trust.
Patrick, you are a font of wisdom.
Right? And horrifying sayings. You should get that stitched onto a pillow. You can only be betrayed by the people you trust.
At least I don't laugh gleefully when the internet is burning.
That's why I don't trust anybody. You shouldn't either.
My mother called me that once. Once.
All right. So there are some stories here, as there are every week. We can't stop them. They keep happening. Let's start with Linux.
Let's start with Linux. This is probably the biggest issue this week.
Yes.
Ish.
Okay.
It's not as big as Log4j because it doesn't give you instant remote access.
Nothing's as big as Log4j. Nothing. However, this one's interesting. So for those of you who are not up and on the know of PwnKit, PwnKit is a Log4j is actually a logging library, and the exploit is Log4Shells. That's what people call it. So in this case, in Linux, for those of you who administered Linux servers and workstations before, there's this PwnKit, which is in essence a PK execute executable that gives you the ability to run.
Don't even know what that is.
Yeah, all it is it's an automated process that runs in the background on Linux on every distribution
for 12 years.
Okay.
That gives you the ability to run as an elevated user. It's kind of like sudo edit or sudo or whatever for those of you.
It sounds super convenient.
It is super convenient. So let's say you needed to do something on the system in an elevated privilege, you could schedule to have this particular executable run it, and that's cool.
It's like in Windows, if you right-click on a link and you say run as administrator.
Exactly. And in this particular case, the PwnKit, Qualys, I think it was Qualys. Yes, Qualys. No, Qualys. Wow, I've read that wrong. That's the dyslexia kicking in. Qualys. I actually discovered, interestingly enough, about 9 years ago, there was a change to this distro for PwnKit to actually introduce, there was a small bug introduced. So what happens now?
9 years ago?
I thought it was 12.
Ago.
I thought it was 12
might have
years
been.
ago.
They say as much as 12 years ago, but they can definitely track it down to 9 years.
So if you're listening to this in 3 years, it'll be 12 years ago.
There you go. It's between 12 and 9 years. A long, long time ago.
An eternity
Linux distro
in
far
Linux
away.
world.
Right.
So what's neat about this one is it requires nothing be introduced on the system. All you need to do is run one small command and you go from a normal user on a Linux box to full root administrator.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second to just clarify this. So there's two primary parts of a hack,
Mhm.
and this is gross oversimplification. There's getting a foothold on the system, remote access, and then there's escalation of privilege. This is the second part.
This reminds me of the underwear gnomes.
Oh God, from South Park.
Yes, yes.
But that's true. Am I missing a stage? I don't
no,
think so.
no. It's
It's, first
Get
step is you
access to
have
the
to
system.
get access. And Log4j provided that.
yeah, and a lot of times Log4j would provide elevated privileges, but if it didn't, this exploit right now you could run on almost any Linux system on the planet and go from a normal user to an administrative user, which is awesome.
So given that it's come out 2 months after Log4j is very bad timing for Linux.
And it is super easy to exploit. Like what's funny about the Qualys team is they said, hey, listen, we're not going to release a POC. We're not going to do it right now because it hasn't been patched yet.
Okay.
But what we are going to do is we're going to just explain a little bit about what it is. And then they went into gory detail about missing environment variables and blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh, okay.
Yeah, Dwayne, just full disclosure, Dwayne created an exploit from their murky descriptions right after they described it.
Right. And then everybody on Twitter's like, wow, this is really easy. It's like 15 lines of code for me to then exploit an entire system. And yeah.
So they're saying they're not releasing it, but it's already out there.
Within like 12 to 14 hours, they release their POC. So if you look for a POC for PwnKit right now, you will find tons of them out there. And security researchers right now are making them even easier to use. Like it used to be, you needed 2 pieces of C++ code that you compiled and run, and that then worked. And then one person said, well, let's compile it in one code. And another person said, let's compile it this way. And another person said, hey, I did it in this one liner that pulls the C++ code from a website and compiles it, makes it super easy. So now it's just a one-liner. It's super easy to get.
All right. So is there a patch yet?
So the patch is forthcoming. Actually, oddly enough, this is super simple to mitigate temporarily. So this is, I guess the point of this is if you're dealing with, if you're administering Linux servers anywhere at all, any distro, and it is running Polkit's PK execute, all you really need to do is modify the execution privileges to 0755 instead of 0777. So instead of allowing everybody on the box to run PK execute, only allow administrators, and you're done. Like
so, Geordie LaForge would be uncoupling the Heisenberg compensators.
So, there's a lot.
Data would be pulling out all those crystals and realigning them.
Even the name PwnKit is only going to make sense to certain classes of people.
Yes.
Video gaming, when we were playing Doom and Quake, if you owned someone, you destroyed them, and it became pwned with a P instead of an O. And so now a lot of the kits are pwn this and pwn that in the leet speak of these young whippersnappers who are now 40.
So question here. If you have the Linux subsystem for Windows or the Bash shell in Windows, are you vulnerable?
No, because it doesn't run the same subsystem. It's like saying if you were to run Wine on Linux, which Wine is a thing that allows you to run Windows applications, would you still be susceptible to a Windows update bug? No, probably not. Not the same subsystem. You could run the same commands, but yeah, you're probably good if you're running a Windows box.
All right.
It's only the
first time
long
ever.
beard.
Yeah.
Unix guys.
Exactly. Microsoft gets a break this week.
Woohoo!
Our number one downloaded show is Microsoft, a bad week for Microsoft or whatever.
Oh, really?
Called, but,
there you go. See, lots of people like to see Microsoft.
I think it's just because of who follows us, Microsoft programmers.
Yeah.
But we want to change that.
Yeah.
So we want you, listeners, to use your vast social networks to get out the word about security this week. Send it to people. Send it to your grandmother. She'll have a good laugh. It's, it's for mere mortals. So
crazy old
share
guys.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get these numbers up.
So if we go back to our formula, how do you know if you have this? Well, if you have a Linux server that's not 12 years old, you got a problem. What do you do about it? You change the permissions on that executable, and you patch as soon as the patch comes out. That's the two bullets that we want people to know.
Okay. And so the next story is related, you said, Dwayne?
Yeah, the next story is related. So I had two links in here. I had the initial PwnKit.txt explanation. So listen, as a super duper challenge for those of you out there who love writing code, you could read the first link we put out, which is the PwnKit.txt from Qualys, and see if you can create your own exploit. Because it's not so hard. And then the second link is actually just a news article from Bleeping Computer talking about it.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. It's a little challenge, a little capture the flag type thing.
Attackers now actively targeting critical SonicWall RCE bug.
That's our next one. So the next.
Oh, wait a minute. So
yeah.
There were two links for the other one.
There were two links. They're just, They look like one
link.
Link. But that top one's actually the explanation from Qualys.
That was an example of Dwayne phishing you, Carl.
I was.
All right. So just so you know that the text file is going to be third in the list.
There you go.
It's just because that's how we roll.
That's how we do the things.
All right.
So SonicWall.
SonicWall. Oh, and you'll notice a lot of times we talk about, while we go back to this Linux bug, a lot of times we talk about this being a priv-esque, privilege escalation, where we escalate. Another terminology we use in the field is LPE, local privilege escalation. So they're the same thing. So
okay.
For all of you who are really itching to read the gory details on this. For those of you that aren't, tell your Unix guy to go fix it.
Or to do something else.
Right. Go do something else.
I thought you were going to go do this.
Tell your Linux guy to install Windows.
Oh.
Yeah, let's see how well they take that.
We just lost 100 subscribers.
Or otherwise half.
hey, for all of them who know what I do, yeah, Linux is kind of my main operating system at this point.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome and cheap.
Yeah, although, Microsoft's doing a really good job at allowing hackers to put more hackety-hack platforms on there so that Windows is a good operating system for it as well.
It's like iPhone. I mean, iPhone used to be, it's like, Apple's got a phone. Apple's got the best phone platform. I would rather go after an Android than have to go after an iPhone.
Oh, yeah.
At this point. And Windows has definitely, it has its bad days and it has its bad weeks, but so does Linux. And so does Mac.
Well, Microsoft isn't necessarily not in our list of stories this week. And that's a little foreshadowing for what's to come, kids. All right, let's talk about SonicWall.
Foreshadow. SonicWall. So SonicWall, this one will be relatively quick. But just another note for patching. Every week we come out with something that's, hey, you should stop what you're doing right now. Pause this podcast. If you own this particular device, go patch it right now and then click resume. Probably shouldn't wait. And this is the same thing with this SonicWall thing. This is a SonicWall critical bug. Critical severity vulnerability impacting SonicWall secure mobile access gateways. So if you're running a SonicWall secure mobile access gateway, right now there is a remote code, unauthenticated remote code execution. So unauth RCE. What that means is you do not need a username and password for the gateway to exploit it and have it run whatever code you want. Oddly enough, it says that the code will then be running under nobody, which is weird because that's an actual user.
There's a user named Nobody.
Yeah, the Beatles sang about him.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, no, that was Nowhere.
No. That might be where he lives.
There's a Laura Branigan song or something like that. All right. Well, anyway.
Yeah, so
here's a question.
Yes.
You said if you're running this SonicWall thing, is there a situation in which somebody would be dependent on this that they wouldn't know they were running it?
No.
Like, is it something that's embedded in a Wi-Fi network or something?
So I guess here's the question. Everyone doesn't know what kind of firewall they have.
Yes.
Everyone won't know what kind of wireless networking they have.
Right.
Everyone doesn't know what kind of engine or fuel injection system or braking system they have. If you're the kind of person who you run a business and you have an MSP or you have someone else,
MSP,
managed service provider,
you're offloading the IT to somebody else.
Yeah.
They're doing this on your behalf, and if they're good, and they're using SonicWall, then they're patching it. If they're not so good, which half of them are above average and half of them are below average. That's the way the world works.
Yeah.
Then they won't realize there's a problem, and it'd be good if you called them up and said, "Hey, if we're using SonicWall, did you apply the patch?"
Be a nudge.
No, yeah, exactly. As the Yiddish in the Yiddish. Let me say this: about once a year, sometimes more often, we reevaluate our firewalls, and it isn't because firewalls, just suddenly become bad. It's because there's industry leaders and there's industry laggards, and those places change. We always want to use best of breed. That said, we could pick a new firewall, implement it, spend a lot of money to do it, and then it has this kind of problem a week later. It's kind of like telling people, well, what's the best stock to buy? Well, this one's doing well last week, but it might tank next week. What you want to do is pick a system that protects you, Fortinet, FortiGate, SonicWall, whatever, Cisco, and you want to keep it up to date and keep it in your mind, keep it in your background so you know when there's a problem, because there are always going to be problems. Yeah. And then you want to evaluate that it hasn't fallen into disrepair. Same as antivirus, same as everything else. So just because SonicWall's in our news doesn't mean they're junk and you should abandon them. What you should do is understand what you're using for this stuff, so when it comes out, you can go and patch it.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, good enough. Guys, I think it's time for our moment of Log4j.
Yeah, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Log4j attacks, Log4 shells. So what's interesting about this is there's some new data coming out. Actually, I don't know if you guys follow this guy on Twitter, but if you do not, Kevin Beaumont, Goss the dog. So at Goss the dog, great information from him. But he started talking about how Log4j, you can use the Log4 shells to exploit VMware Horizon. We talked about that last week, where we said, if you have a VMware Horizon system that's accessible on the internet and it hasn't been patched, then sure enough, you could be susceptible to Log4j attack, and the attackers can run whatever they want. Well, what do you do at that point as an attacker, right? Do you go and put a whole bunch of Bitcoin miners on your network? Probably not. You probably want persistent access to that network. The best way to get persistent access is to put a shell on the network, something that's going to call back to you, so that you can then get on that network anytime you want.
A shell is a remote command line.
Thank you.
So basically, if Dwayne pops a shell on your system, he now has a command line at his computer that controls your computer that you don't know anything about. Yeah, pop some tags. We should do a parody of pop some tags with pop some shells.
Pop some shells. So what's interesting about this is he says, hey, listen, be careful, because if your systems have been exploited by Log4j, exploited by Log4 shells over the Log4j library in the past, what attackers are now doing is they're actually modifying native files in VMware Horizon to spin up shells that way. So you may not see the new files because they actually go into, and I think he references in his one of his tweets, he references one of the files, the absg-worker.js file. Just, hey, know that these files come with VMware Horizon and they could get modified to actually spin up a shell. So just realize, if your box has been compromised, you really do want to go with a fine tooth forensically through those boxes and make sure they're still not, even after you patch.
Okay.
That's our latest Log4j supplement.
But not our last.
Not our last.
And that was our moment of Log4j. But we have a couple more stories. It's not all about Log4j.
No, it's not all about Log4j. And we did talk about, interestingly enough, a couple weeks ago, we had talked about the FTC potentially suing companies over lost data in this Log4j, Log4 shells fiasco.
Right.
So for those of you who haven't seen that or listened to that episode, shame on you. But for those of you who have, we're talking about, if you had a system that was susceptible to Log4j and you lost user data, now the FTC is saying, hey, you know what? We may actually sue you for lost damages because somebody has to protect these users who now you've lost their data.
Well, this is New York's Attorney General went after these guys. IMED.
IMED. So IMED is an Ohio-based healthcare provider that's been fined $600,000 over a data breach that exposed the records of 2.1 million patients across America.
So this is the definition of insult to injury.
Yeah.
Because not only did they suffer the breach, which hurt their brand and is costing them money internally to remediate and deal with, but now they have a fine on top of it. And this is the government ratcheting down to make it more and more painful so that companies actually do the things that they could have done to prevent this are common sense and well established. There's no magic here.
What's interesting to me is that this is an Ohio-based healthcare provider, yet the New York Attorney General is suing them. Does that open them up to lawsuits from other states?
Any place they did business, any place whose citizens were affected.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we're entering that phase. We've been talking about this for months.
Yeah, but we haven't had an actual case. And this is the first I've heard of.
Yeah, these, and we'll start to see a lot more of these. I mean, this one, I don't know that this one actually, did they track this down to a Log4j breach, or was this just a normal breach?
There've been fines in the past, but usually the fines are along the lines of there was specific guidance of HIPAA that you didn't follow. The HIPAA, this is now generic. There's no specific law like HIPAA. I'm calling it like my Boston accent's coming out. HIPAA. This is more of you didn't follow. It's negligence. You didn't follow what everyone knows should be common practices. Well, now every company in the world should be panicking to go and actually get serious about security.
And you should be listening to our damn show.
Exactly.
If they were just listening, somebody would have said, "Hey."
Well, there was a movement at one point for every company to have someone on their board. Every public company in the United States, to have someone on their board who had cyber experience, or for them to demonstrate where they were getting that advice from. And it didn't turn into a bill. But I think we're going to see more and more of this because everybody's just getting sick of it. We're all getting sick of the ransomwares, the breaches, and then just the incompetence. Like they're ostriches. They're hiding their head in the sand. This is password management and two-factor authentication. None of this stuff should be news to anybody. Okay, rant over.
I'm off my soapbox.
All right, so there's got to be a Russian story here somewhere.
Yes, there is.
There is always a Russian story, yeah?
Always Russian story.
Always Russian. Russians are good.
APT-29.
Yes, so Russian APT-29. I always wonder, it's always tough. How do they give them the number? Is
this a hacker group?
Who discovers them first? Yeah, so APT, for those of you who may not know, is just an advanced persistent threat. APT is a nation state equivalent, either a country with a cyber army that's attacking or some very well funded organization that has an offensive cyber team.
That works for a government.
Yeah, that typically works for a government. That's APT.
If they don't work for a government, then they're probably hacktivists or a criminal syndicate.
Sure.
So those are the only three categories, I think.
All right. So what's the news?
So this is interesting. Most of these APT names are really hard to remember. 29 versus 27 versus 28 or whatever. CrowdStrike typically gives them actual names. So this one is actually Cozy Bear. So we've all heard of Cozy Bear.
I know Cozy Bear.
Not like Fuzzy Bear, but Cozy Bear.
Cozy Bear. It's lovely. It's like a warm hug from a bottle of vodka.
There go the rest of our subscribers, man.
I'm sorry. I apologize for the fake Russian accent. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I don't blame you if you flood us with email and tweets saying that, whatever. It's just a joke. It's a bad joke, and I'm sorry.
A bad joke.
Lord, I apologize.
My wife always tells me, she's like, listen, you can't do accents of anybody. You sound
can't.
horrible. You got to stop. Like, oh. So this one is warning. We always talk here about, and I won't go too much into the details here. This is a report that was released to Bleeping Computer from CrowdStrike, actually, on a particular type of attack that's attacking people's Office 365 and attempting and sometimes succeeding in bypassing MFA, which is the multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
So the reason I wanted to bring this article up is this, and this one's really complicated, so we're not going to go too deep into it. It involves like credential hopping and hijacking and all sorts of other stuff. But the advice to the sort of normal user is we constantly hear say, use MFA, use multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
If PayPal can text you some secure code that you can then type in, do that. If Google Authenticator is used every time you log into a particular website, turn it on. Right?
Authenticators are really good.
Yeah, there's no reason not to have them. And then you read the news like this, where they go, oh my gosh, Russia just bypassed MFA, right? Does that make it all garbage? And it doesn't, right? The advice still stands.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So there's different flavors of multi-factor authentication. So
yes,
let's talk about this for a minute. There's one flavor is the one that most people think of is you go to your bank, you try to log in, it sends you a code, a text message to your phone, and you put that code in. And now the bank feels that they've authenticated not only that you know the password to the web and the username and password to the site, but that you have the phone device belonging to the owner. Now, here's the rub. If I can get your username and password, and I can convince the phone company to do a SIM replication, a SIM swap with me, I can have a copy of your phone. And in doing so, now, by hacking the phone vendor, which is not trivial, but it's possible, I can get through that second factor authentication. And that's what we're seeing a lot of the time. Now, another way to do this is to send an email to the person at an email address that they have that we know they control. But the same thing applies. If I can get your username and password for your banking, I probably can get your username and password for your email.
Would you say, Patrick, that the risk of an attack goes down when you use multi-factor authentication?
It does, because it's an additional hoop. But let's talk about what would be even better. There are other authenticators that you can get. There are authenticator apps that you can use and other mechanisms of multi-factor authentication that take it out. That can't be, Dwayne, Google Authenticator is one. What are some of the other ones?
Microsoft has one for Azure.
Yeah, RSA. I actually really like Microsoft's. There's RSA authenticators. There's all sorts of authenticators out there.
Here's the thing. If somebody has your phone SIM and they have your Google password, they could download and install the authenticator and Bob's your uncle.
So yes and no. If they have the phone SIM, they could get a text with like if you say, hey, text me. But if they have your phone SIM and then try and download the authenticator is going to be unique on that phone. And that's actually a concern too. You got to be careful when you download these authenticators and then let's say you update to a new iPhone or a new Android phone or whatever, make sure you copy down or export your keys for those that authenticator to the new phone, because if not, the new phone won't have access.
Grandma Franklin wouldn't even know what you meant by download the keys. Who knows that? I mean, what does that mean?
It's the guys at the Apple Store. No, it's in most these authenticators, before you pitch the old phone, just make sure that in the settings you can say, I want to transfer this to a new location.
Okay.
But if the phone is destroyed, then life is difficult.
Yeah, there are ways around that too. Like I use we've talked about this before, password managers. I use 1Password.
I do
that
too.
also does authentication. So I can use that as my MFA. It does the rolling tick just like Google Authenticator does. And then they keep that up in the cloud for me.
So what would you do if your phone got stolen and you don't have a code?
Well, Patrick would say he'd just have the drone drop the bomb on it, but
I just detonate the charge that I've already installed in the phone.
Wow, his phone has this big brick of clay on the back.
It's hissing. What does that mean? Boom!
Like a Maxwell Smart movie.
Carl, I've managed to get rid of the hiss.
It's just going to go bang.
Yeah, only the first versions had the hiss. So.
Oh, evil,
Actually,
evil.
it rings, so they put it next to their head. And
Oh,
then
there
it
you go.
there you go.
then
And it's a shaped charge. Patrick, now we've lost all of our younger listeners.
More career advice.
Hey, if they've watched The Blacklist, they're still with us.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
Game of Thrones.
fantastic.
All right, but seriously, what would you do if you had a phone, if somebody
Yes.
you know has a phone, it gets stolen and there's no security on the phone? What do you do? You've got a big problem, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you have a big problem. If there's no security on the phone, like no PIN, no lock, no anything, you just turn it on and use it.
I suppose you can go to the phone vendor, like, if it's a
Sure.
AT&T or whatever, and say, whoever you have the phone to, lock this phone. Or maybe there's a feature that you can do that with
If it's
iPhones.
So, no,
perhaps?
tell
If
you-
it's a business phone,
you know what I would do?
You can brick it.
So listen,
Yeah.
iPhone, you can't register a new iPhone without having an Apple account, without having an iTunes, iCloud account.
Yes, but the problem he's talking about is them you basically stealing your phone and having an identity theft.
Absolutely.
No, but hold on. So if you were to steal my iPhone and it were unlocked, not that it would be, but it were unlocked, I would instantly log into my iCloud account and tell it to wipe the phone.
And you
That's
can do
true.
that.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing with Android. Android requires you to have a Google account.
Mm.
And in the Google account, you can go in and do the same thing. Hey,
Oh.
where's my phone? Hey, play a lock, lock the phone, wipe the storage, whatever. So that's what I would say is, like, if you're
Wow.
not familiar with those pages and where they are, absolutely get familiar with where's the Find My
But don't
device
click on the
Apple.
wipe my phone.
No, as a test. Yep,
Hey,
it works.
I wonder what this button does.
And backups are really important.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Because if you
I-
back your phone up, you can then get a new iPhone and restore it down.
Now, if you do that, that keeps your authenticators the
It does.
same. It doesn't.
Yep. All of
Hmm.
that stuff will be there.
So that's where the continuity of authenticators is easy. Is if you back your phone up regularly, buy a new phone, and then restore it from the backup, then you don't have to play with that mess that Dwayne talked about authentication apps.
So that's really good. I mean, I never thought about backing up my phone for security purposes. Like, if I had to restore it, because I want to obviously wipe my phone because it got stolen. That's a really good reason to do that. Sometimes I think, when I get that message, hey, your iPhone hasn't been backed up, or maybe your iCloud storage needs to be expanded and you got to pay a couple more dollars. People ignore that.
Yep.
How do we get a commission on that?
Yeah, but honestly, I mean, I do the same thing where I'm like, oh, well, it's full. Maybe I'll get rid of some of photos or whatever. But really, what suffers is your photos. Some of them might not be backed up, but your phone's not backing up either. And if the whole phone image isn't backing up, then there's no way for you to restore it back down. Even if
anytime you add a password to an authenticator, you add some kind of multi-factor authentication to an authenticator.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea to go and make sure you do a backup.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That would be a best practice, in my opinion.
Now, the other thing is most sites that you turn on multi-factor authentication will give you emergency codes. So, like, if you go to PayPal and say, hey, I want to turn on MFA and notify my phone, blah, 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 whatever, then they'll say, hey, here's 10 codes that are throwaway codes. They're only one-time use. Keep them in a safe place. So, like, I would literally print them out. Don't keep them on your computer. But print them out and put them in a safe. And that way, hey, if you ever get locked out somewhere or your phone gets destroyed, you at least have 10 codes. You can go in and then unlock it and set it to a new phone. So,
But then you have to have thought about security before you needed it.
yeah.
And no one does that.
No.
No one does it. I would recommend this. Everyone listening to this, please, 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 every week spend 10 minutes thinking about and acting on your own security, whether that's going and setting up a backup or reading, or changing a password.
Patrick and I even do it in physical security. Like I'll be standing at the sink at like the twilight hours at night, and I'll shut the light off above the sink, and my wife will be like, "What are you doing?" I say, "I'm making it harder for the snipers in the woods to see me." And she's like, "What is wrong with you?" Honestly,
Yeah, I know. I always want to have a clean shot at you, Dwayne. So you keep shutting that damn light off.
I only miss once.
Yeah.
That's what thermals are for.
On that cheery note,
Yeah,
thermals
so-
are fun.
So now that we've covered those things, there are two Microsoft-related stories. Yes, that's true.
Microsoft.
It's one of them has to do with Azure, and this is one of the first big ones that I've heard of.
No, I've heard of a bunch of
Azure.
them, but
This is awesome.
this is the fact that DDoSs are getting bigger and bigger.
Distributed denial of service attack. So this was a 3.47 terabit per second attack. Essentially what this company or personal or whatever, whoever the attacker was, got 10,000 sources, in other words, other computers across the world, to just hammer this server that was running on Azure in Asia. And it lasted what, like 15 minutes or something?
That's about right. Yeah.
But this was the biggest one, I think.
So is this botnet driven?
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, roughly 10,000 sources across the world. So that means that somebody had a botnet. They had, a bunch of cameras or systems that are connected to high bandwidth systems and people sound. So your Aunt Sally and your Uncle Joe might have participated in this attack, and they coordinate them to all like hammer at the target at the same time. And if they did this to a small hosting provider, it would drop. They wouldn't be able to keep up typically. But the big providers are really getting very good at this. They're learning how to segregate and using AI to detect abusive traffic and dropping packets on the first or sending them into a slow response cycle. There's all sorts of ways for them to deal with this. And so we're going to see these headlines keep going up.
And one of the reasons that these attacks have escalated is because of the emergence of these distributed denial of service for hire services, which are cheap to acquire. So there's some more career advice for criminals. If you don't want to do the hard work yourself, you can find, a for hire service to bring your competitors to their knees. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. Here you go. So I guess this isn't the first one that they've fended off, but it's good to know that Microsoft is prepared for it.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, 3.4 terabits per second that's a lot of bits.
That's a lot of data.
I don't know, math-wise, I think it's close to almost the Library of Congress every couple of seconds.
Wow.
And that's a lot of data. So, yeah, it's impressive. They do a good job.
All right, and our last story, and I mean that, Lazarus hackers use Windows Update to deploy malware. So you thought you were being safe by updating Windows, and boom, malware infection.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. Because listen, as a hacker, I've always tried to manipulate Windows Update, because that would be the creme de la creme of deploying malware. If you can be like, I'll just have Windows deploy it for me.
So Dwayne, is this awesome?
This is awesome. This is awesome.
So awesome.
So what's interesting about this particular type of attack is this actually comes down to a normal phishing attack again. Like somebody gets breached over, sending an email with a link, and they click on something or a Word document that was hidden in a zip file that they had to double click on and open up, whatever. So normal sort of entry point. So here again, advice to the normal user: if you're not expecting something from someone on an email, don't click on it. But if you do, in this particular case, what happens is the malware, the little dropper, so sort of malware terminology. When you click on something, usually the thing that runs is not the full like crypto ransomware, whatever. It's just a dropper. It's just a small piece of code that's going to reach out and grab data from the internet and run it. In this particular case, that's highly detectable. So if Word goes to reach out to a website and grab data and pull it down and run it, like CrowdStrike and all the other endpoint detection antivirus goes, whoa, that's weird. Don't do that. Right. But in this particular case, what happens is they modify some settings and call some native libraries for Windows Update and have it then go out and download these files. So the neat thing about this is how stealthy it is. Because if you're monitoring that system and you're watching what's going on, it literally looks like Windows Update is busy. It's just pulling stuff down. And you don't really have the understanding that what it is pulling down is malware. That's definitely not to say you shouldn't patch. You absolutely should always patch. But it is interesting that if you guys are out there, anybody who is out there who's a blue team or a threat hunter or looking to find people pulling down malicious software, don't exclude Windows Update, because you should take a look at where they're pulling down information from as well.
So, but the advice to Joe or Josephine listener is don't worry about it?
I would say don't worry about it. I mean, honestly, if you click on something you shouldn't, chances are there's I don't think you're running a full security operations center at your house with threat hunters looking at everything. So
except Pat. Yes.
Maybe Patrick. So if that's the case, I mean, they're probably not going to take this very stealthy Windows Updater route of pulling down software. They're just going to literally download it straight to your computer.
Or they're going to send you an email with a, hey, you should update your browser.
Yeah, exactly. So honestly, everybody who's listening to this podcast, everybody should always have Windows Updater on.
Yeah.
I have it always on and tell it to update immediately when patches come down. I don't care if I'm in the middle of a hey, Windows Updater rebooted me. No, I'm only kidding. But yeah, joke, I don't care Dwayne. If I'm in the middle of a web call or whatever. I'd rather it patch my system than me.
So that said, somebody's going to say, well, sometimes the patches are malevolent. And it happens occasionally that there's a bug or a problem with it. Is rare. And if you really want that and you have the discipline, you can wait 2 days, but don't turn it off and then not run it. It's safer. It's like the people who say, well, if you wear a seatbelt, you're more likely to get pinned. It's like, no, the statistics show you're safer with the seatbelt. You're safer with auto updates. So you should just use it.
Yeah. Yep. Don't get me started. All right. We are calling this show, What If You Lost Your Phone?
I like it.
There you go.
Because I think that was a nugget of advice. And we try to give advice on this show, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we do.
Demystifying the mysterious. And by the way, I found a really nice night vision thermal scope.
Ooh, very nice.
Is this how you get birthday presents for yourself?
It is.
Honey, I'm going to buy one of these.
I have night vision, but I've never had thermal because it was always too expensive. But now the price is coming down. Anyways, on that note.
Good.
See you guys soon.
All right. We'll see you later. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.